Imagine this. You're standing on a battlefield, watching 80,000 men prepare to face an empire that rules over 100 million people. An empire with unlimited resources, endless armies, and a military tradition stretching back centuries. Logic says these 80,000 soldiers don't stand a chance. History says they should be crushed. Every strategic calculation says this is suicide. And yet, what happens next will completely rewrite the rules of warfare and shock the entire world. This is the story of how a seemingly impossible military campaign became one of the greatest tactical masterpieces in human history. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change the way you think about strategy, leadership, and the power of human ingenuity forever. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're exploring some of the most fascinating moments in history, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's get into it. The year is 1796 and Europe is in chaos. Revolutionary France has been fighting for its survival against a coalition of monarchies terrified that revolutionary ideas might spread to their own kingdoms. France is surrounded, outnumbered, and running out of options. The country is bankrupt, its people are starving, and its enemies are closing in from every direction. The Austrian Empire, one of the most powerful forces in Europe, controls much of Italy and is preparing to crush the French revolutionary spirit once and for all. The situation looks hopeless. France needs a miracle. What they get instead is a 26-year-old general named Napoleon Bonaparte. Now I know what you're thinking. Napoleon? Yeah, we've all heard of him. But here's the thing, this isn't the Napoleon who crowned himself emperor or who marched on Moscow. This is Napoleon before the legend, before anyone knew his name, when he was just an ambitious young officer with radical ideas about warfare that nobody took seriously. The French government is desperate enough to give him command of the army of Italy, not because they believe in him, but because they're out of options. They hand him an army of about 40,000 men, though the number will grow to around 80,000 as the campaign progresses. These aren't elite troops, they're poorly equipped, barely fed, and their morale is somewhere below rock bottom. Many haven't been paid in months, their uniforms are falling apart. They're wearing whatever shoes they can find, if they have shoes at all. Some are literally marching in wooden clogs. Napoleon arrives to take command and immediately realizes he's been handed what most generals would consider a death sentence. His orders are to invade Italy, defeat the Austrian forces there, and somehow support the main French armies fighting on other fronts. Oh, and do it all with minimal supplies and no reinforcements. Simple, right? But here's where the genius begins. Napoleon looks at this impossible situation and sees opportunity. He understands something that will become his trademark throughout his career. Speed and audacity can overcome superior numbers. Morale is a weapon as powerful as any cannon, and rules are meant to be broken. Let me paint the picture of what Napoleon is up against. The Austrian Empire controls a massive territory stretching from modern-day Austria through much of Italy. They have professional soldiers, well-supplied armies, fortified positions, and they're allied with the Kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont, which means Napoleon is facing enemies on multiple fronts. The Austrians have maybe 70,000 troops in the region, supported by Piedmontese forces. They have better equipment, better training, and they control the high ground in the Alps and Apennines. From a conventional military perspective, the French shouldn't even attempt this campaign. They should dig in, defend their borders, and hope for a negotiated peace. Napoleon has other plans. He calls his ragged army together and delivers a speech that will become legendary. He tells them about the rich Italian plains waiting beyond the mountains. He promises them glory, honor, and yes, plunder. He's honest with them. This won't be easy. Many won't survive, but those who do will be part of something extraordinary. The effect is electric. These starving, demoralized soldiers suddenly have a purpose. They have a leader who speaks to them not as cannon fodder, but as partners in an audacious adventure. This is psychological warfare at its finest, and it starts with his own troops. The campaign begins in April 1796, and immediately Napoleon does something unexpected. The Austrians and Piedmontese forces are positioned separately, planning to link up and crush the French between them. Standard military doctrine says Napoleon should take a defensive position and try to hold off both armies. Instead, he attacks, but not randomly. He strikes right at the point where the two enemy armies are trying to connect, using speed and concentration of force to keep them separated. This is the strategic principle that will define the entire campaign. Divide and conquer. Never let your enemies combine their strength. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and move before they can react. The Battle of Montenotte is the first test. Napoleon takes a smaller Austrian force by surprise, using rapid movements and attacking from unexpected angles. The Austrians are used to slow, methodical warfare, where armies march in formation and fight set-piece battles. Napoleon is doing something entirely different. He's moving his army like it's a rapier instead of a hammer, striking and withdrawing, concentrating force at decisive points, and then dispersing before the enemy can respond. Within days, he's won several battles, and the Piedmontese are already suing for peace. One enemy eliminated in less than 2 weeks. Now he can focus on the Austrians, and this is where the campaign becomes a true masterpiece. The Austrian commander, General Beaulieu, is a competent officer trained in the traditional methods of warfare. He tries to establish defensive lines, protect his supply routes, and force Napoleon into a battle of attrition that the French can't win. But Napoleon refuses to play by those rules. Every time Beaulieu sets up a defensive position, Napoleon finds a way around it. When the Austrians expect him to attack from one direction, he appears from another. He's using the geography of Italy itself as a weapon, moving through mountain passes that conventional wisdom says can't be traversed quickly, appearing where he's not supposed to be, and keeping the Austrians constantly off balance. The Battle of Lodi in May 1796 becomes a defining moment. There's a bridge over the Adda River, heavily defended by Austrian artillery. Taking this bridge through a frontal assault should be impossible. Napoleon orders it anyway. To withering fire, French soldiers charge across the bridge in a scene that seems lifted from a movie. They take horrific casualties, but they keep coming, and they overrun the Austrian positions. Napoleon himself is in the thick of it, and his soldiers start calling him the Little Corporal, a nickname that reflects their affection and respect. This isn't just about taking a bridge, it's about building a legend. The soldiers now believe they're invincible when Napoleon leads them. That belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. By early summer, Napoleon has driven the Austrians out of most of northern Italy. He's taken Milan, and the French army is finally getting properly fed and equipped from captured Austrian supplies. But the Austrians aren't giving up. They send reinforcement after reinforcement, trying to wear down the French through sheer weight of numbers. Napoleon's response is to keep attacking. Traditional military theory says an army should rest after major engagements, consolidate gains, and prepare for the next phase. Napoleon barely pauses. He understands that momentum is everything. If he stops, the Austrians will regroup, reorganize, and bring their superior resources to bear. But if he keeps them reeling, keeps them reacting instead of acting, they never get the chance to use their advantages. The siege of Mantua becomes the centerpiece of the entire campaign. Mantua is a heavily fortified city that controls key routes through northern Italy. The Austrians garrison it with thousands of troops and massive supplies, planning to use it as a base for counterattacks. Napoleon surrounds the city and settles in for a siege, but this isn't a passive blockade. He's using Mantua as bait. The Austrians have to try to relieve the siege, which means they have to attack him on ground of his choosing. Over the next several months, the Austrians launch 4 separate relief expeditions, each with tens of thousands of troops. Each time, Napoleon defeats them. Let me break down what makes this so brilliant. Napoleon has maybe 50 to 60,000 troops around Mantua, but he can't keep them all in one place because the Austrians could attack from multiple directions. So he positions them in several corps, each one capable of fighting independently but close enough to support each other. This is the core system that will revolutionize warfare. When an Austrian relief force approaches, the nearest French corps engages them and holds them in place, while Napoleon rushes reinforcements from other positions. He's using interior lines, meaning his forces have shorter distances to travel than the Austrians, who are approaching from outside the circle. Time and again, Austrian columns march toward Mantua, expecting to outnumber the French, only to find Napoleon has somehow concentrated a superior force at the exact point of contact. The Battle of Castiglione, in August 1796, is a perfect example. The Austrians attack with about 50,000 men in multiple columns. Napoleon has similar numbers, but he's spread out. By rapid marching and precise coordination, he brings his forces together at exactly the right moment and catches the Austrian columns before they can unite. He defeats them in detail, meaning he beats them one piece at a time before they can combine their strength. The Austrians retreat, leaving thousands of dead and wounded, and Mantua remains surrounded. The Austrians try again in September at Bassano, and again Napoleon outmaneuvers them. They try in November at Arcole, in one of the most dramatic battles of the campaign, where fighting rages for 3 days over a narrow bridge, and the outcome hangs by a thread. Legend says Napoleon personally grabbed a flag and led a charge, though historians debate whether that actually happened. What's certain is that the French win again, and the Austrian relief attempt fails again. By January 1797, Mantua finally surrenders, and Napoleon has eliminated the last major Austrian stronghold in Italy. But the campaign isn't over. The Austrian Empire is still determined to defeat this upstart French general, who's embarrassed them repeatedly. They assemble yet another army, the largest yet, and prepare for a final showdown. Napoleon's response is to go on the offensive one more time. Instead of waiting for the Austrians to attack him in Italy, he decides to march on Vienna itself. This is audacious to the point of insanity. He's taking his army through the Alps in winter, heading toward the heart of the Austrian Empire, hundreds of miles from any support. If anything goes wrong, his entire army could be destroyed. What follows is one of the most remarkable military marches in history. Napoleon drives his army through the mountains, moving so fast that Austrian commanders can't believe the intelligence reports. By March 1797, French troops are within striking distance of Vienna. The Austrian capital is in panic. The roads are clogged with refugees. The imperial court is preparing to evacuate. Napoleon has brought an empire of 100 million people to its knees, with an army that never numbered more than 80,000 men in the field. The Austrians are forced to negotiate. The Treaty of Campo Formio, signed in October 1797, ends the war on French terms. Austria cedes Belgium and recognizes French control of northern Italy. The French Republic, which was on the verge of collapse just 18 months earlier, is now the dominant power in Western Europe, and Napoleon, the obscure officer that nobody wanted to give a command to, is now the most famous man in France. So what makes this campaign such a masterpiece? Let's break it down, because there are lessons here that go way beyond military history. First, Napoleon understood speed as a weapon. In an era when armies moved slowly and campaigns lasted years, he completed an entire conquest in 18 months through Consta. NT movement. He exhausted his enemies not through direct combat, but by making them chase him, react to him, and always be one step behind. Second, he used psychology as effectively as artillery. The morale of his own troops, the fear and confusion of his enemies, the political impact of his victories, all of these were weapons he wielded consciously. He understood that war isn't just about destroying enemy forces, it's about destroying their will to fight. Third, Napoleon broke the rules, but not randomly. He studied military theory obsessively, understood all the conventional principles, and then violated them when violation served his purposes. He knew when to divide his forces, which every military manual says is suicide, because he could reunite them faster than his enemies could exploit the division. He knew when to fight and when to maneuver, He understood that the goal isn't to fight battles but to win campaigns. Some of his greatest victories came from maneuvers that made battles unnecessary because the enemy position became untenable. Fourth, he adapted constantly. When something didn't work, he tried something else immediately. When the situation changed, his plans changed with it. There's a famous quote attributed to him, although historians aren't sure he actually said it, that no plan survives contact with the enemy. Whether he said those exact words or not, his actions embodied that principle. He had strategic goals but tactical flexibility. He knew where he intended to end up, but he was willing to take any path that got him there. Fifth, and this might be the most important, Napoleon understood that resources matter less than how you use them. The Austrians had more soldiers, more money, more supplies, more everything. But Napoleon had better strategy, better tactics, and better leadership. He won because he made fewer mistakes than his opponents, and because he created situations where their advantages couldn't be brought to bear. This is the ultimate lesson for anyone facing long odds in any field. You don't win by having more resources than your competition. You win by using the resources you have more effectively. Now, I want to be clear about something. Napoleon was a military genius, but that doesn't make him a hero in the moral sense. His later campaigns would cost hundreds of thousands of lives. His ambition would eventually lead to his downfall and bring immense suffering to Europe. The Italian campaign itself wasn't bloodless. Thousands died, cities were plundered, and civilian populations suffered. When we study military history, we're analyzing strategic and tactical brilliance, not endorsing the wars themselves. The genius of the Italian campaign lies in its execution, not in its ultimate purpose. But from a purely military perspective, this campaign is as close to perfection as warfare gets. Consider what Napoleon accomplished. He took an army that was on the verge of mutiny and turned it into an unstoppable force. He defeated multiple enemy armies, each roughly equal to or larger than his own force. He conquered an entire region, captured or neutralized every major fortress, and forced one of Europe's great powers to sue for peace. He did all of this in 18 months, operating hundreds of miles from his base, with minimal support from Paris, and while the French government was simultaneously fighting wars on several other fronts. The ripple effects of this campaign are enormous. Militarily, Napoleon demonstrated principles that would influence warfare for the next 2 centuries. The core system, the emphasis on maneuver over attrition, the use of interior lines, the importance of speed and surprise, all of these became fundamental to modern military doctrine. Military academies still study the Italian campaign as a textbook example of operational art. Politically, the campaign made Napoleon a force in French politics. Within 2 years, he would overthrow the Directory in a coup and make himself first consul, effectively the dictator of France. The Italian campaign was the foundation of the Napoleonic Empire that would reshape Europe for the next 15 years. But beyond Napoleon himself, the campaign showed that the old order of European warfare was dead. For centuries, wars had been fought by professional armies moving slowly, following rigid protocols, and avoiding decisive action. Battles were rare because both sides knew that losing an army meant losing the war, so commanders were cautious. Napoleon threw all of that out and showed that aggressive, decisive action could achieve results that caution never would. Within a decade, every major European power would be trying to copy his methods. Warfare would never be the same. There's something almost cinematic about the Italian campaign. You have the underdog story, the genius protagonist, the impossible odds, the dramatic battles, and the triumphant conclusion. If someone pitched this as a movie script, you might think it was too unbelievable. 80,000 poorly equipped soldiers defeat an empire. A 26-year-old nobody becomes the most powerful man in Europe. It sounds like fantasy, but it's history. It actually happened. And that's what makes it so compelling. I think there's something deeply human in this story too. It's about potential, about what can be achieved when talent meets opportunity. Napoleon was brilliant, but he was also lucky. lucky to be in the right place at the right time, lucky that France was desperate enough to take a chance on him, lucky that his early battles went well and built his reputation. But he seized that luck and multiplied it through skill, determination, and sheer audacity. How many potential Napoleons never get their chance? How many brilliant strategies never get implemented because the person who conceived them doesn't have the opportunity or the authority to make them real? The Italian campaign reminds us that talent needs opportunity, but it also shows that when the two align, the results can be world-changing. If you're interested in strategy, whether in military, history, business, sports, or any competitive field, the Italian campaign offers a master class. Watch how Napoleon creates advantages out of nothing. See how he turns his enemy's strengths into weaknesses by attacking where they're unprepared and avoiding where they're strong. Notice how he builds momentum and uses each victory to make the next one easier. Observe how he manages his own team, keeping them motivated even in desperate circumstances. These principles apply far beyond the battlefield. Anytime you're facing long odds, anytime you're outmatched in resources, anytime conventional wisdom says you can't win, there are lessons here. The Italian campaign also reminds us that wars are won or lost before the first shot is fired. Napoleon won because he understood warfare at a deeper level than his opponents. He'd studied every campaign, read every military theorist, and thought deeply about the nature of conflict. When the opportunity came, he wasn't improvising, he was applying principles he'd spent years developing. This is true in any field. The people who look like overnight successes usually aren't. They're people who've been preparing for years, and when their moment comes, they're ready. As we wrap up, I want you to think about this. In the spring of 1796, if you'd asked any military expert in Europe who would win the war in Italy, exactly 0 of them would have picked Napoleon and the French. The smart money was on the Austrians. They had every advantage. The outcome was supposed to be inevitable. But history is full of moments when the inevitable doesn't happen, when someone sees the situation differently, plays by different rules, and changes what's possible. The Italian campaign is one of those moments, a moment when one person's vision and determination rewrote the script. So the next time you're facing impossible odds, the next time everyone tells you something can't be done, remember this story. Remember 80,000 soldiers who defeated an empire, not because they had superior numbers or better weapons, but because they had superior leadership, superior strategy, and the audacity to attempt what everyone else thought was impossible. That's the real lesson of the Italian campaign. The greatest limitations are often the ones we accept without questioning. The greatest victories come from refusing to accept that victory is impossible. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most remarkable military campaigns, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel and lets me know you want more content like this. Drop a comment below telling me which historical battle or campaign you'd like me to cover next. I read every comment, and your suggestions often become future videos. And of course, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss when I upload the next video. We've got some incredible stories coming up that I think you're going to love. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious, keep learning, and never let anyone tell you that something is impossible, just because it's never been done before. History is full of people who proved the impossible was just the untried. Be one of those people.